One. Hi, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this very special event with Michael Holley to celebrate the launch of the Big Three. My name is Kim Havens, and I'm the event manager here at An Unlikely Story. I'm so happy to welcome Michael back, as I think he holds the record for the most events held here at An Unlikely Story, as we just keep inviting him back. Michael is a brilliant storyteller, trusted to tell the stories of sports legends, from the notoriously private Bill Belichick to superstar players, superstar slugger Big Papi, and now the legendary Celtics trio of superstar players Paul Pierce, Ray Allen, and Kevin Garnett. Joining Michael this evening is Jeff Kinney, best-selling author, owner of An Unlikely Story, and huge Celtics fan. I have a few technical tips before we start. If you lose your connection or video, just exit out of your browser completely and jump right back in. If you have questions for Michael, you can type them in the Ask a Question box at the bottom of your screen, and you can also upvote questions, and the most popular ones float to the top. Click on the green button below to purchase a copy of the Big Three. You are definitely going to want to read it. And Michael has very kindly agreed to come into the store in person to sign and personalize copies of the book itself. So you can get all your shopping done in one shot. Michael started his journalism career writing for the Akron Beacon Journal in 1993, where he was one of several reporters who worked on a project studying race relations in northeastern Ohio. The series, entitled A Question of Color, won the 1994 Pulitzer Prize for Meritorious Public Service. He then worked as a reporter and columnist for the Boston Globe from 1997 to 2001, and then again from 2002 to 2005. He was the co-host of WEEI's Dale and Holley Show, and has also appeared on ESPN's popular show Around the Horn and on Fox Sports Net's IMAX. Michael is the best-selling author of Belichick and Brady, War Room, Red Sox Rule, and Patriot Reign, and the best-selling collaborator for Teddy Bruschi's Never Give Up and David Ortiz's Poppy, My Story. Michael is currently co-executive producer and co-host of Brother from Another on Peacock, a talk show and studio host at NBC Sports Boston, and a professor at Boston University. And so without further ado, I am just so honored to welcome Michael Holley back to An Unlikely Story virtually, along with Jeff Kinney. Yay!
Thanks, Kim. And thank you so much, Michael, for coming back to us in this virtual sort of way. I think one of the most exciting moments for me as a bookstore owner was when you came to our stage for the first time. And you were just appreciating that there was this independent bookstore here, and it gave you a chance to connect with your fans in a really personal setting. And so that was really cool. I was like, I think we made it if Michael Holley likes this place. So thank you.
No, thank you, Jeff. And not only do you have the title of my favorite bookstore, I am so envious of you. I almost don't like you sometimes because, you know, Jeff, I'm like over the garage right now, you know, in this work from home space. We all figure it out the way we can. So I'm over the garage and I'm doing my thing in here. I'm always in here and either doing something on TV or writing something. And I see the kids and they're like, hey, Dad. Hey, Dad. Okay. Hey, kids. Hey, Dad. When I told them that my first book signing was with Jeff Kinney. Oh my God, Dad, you're in conversation with Jeff Kinney. Oh, can we come? I said, no, it's virtual. It's virtual. Calm down. Are you going to get a book from him? Yeah, we'll try to get you a book. So my kids, I work every day, Jeff, and I don't get any reaction. And I tell them I'm going to be in conversation with you. And now I'm the cool dad.
That's really hilarious, and thank you for that. I'm sure people didn't come to this to hear about me, so we're going to turn the camera back on you.
Yes, they did. Yes.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's funny. You're saying you're working above your garage. I typically work at the cemetery because I can't be in the house when the kids are doing homeschooling. But, you know, something that really struck me, I want to fast forward through this book all the way to the epilogue where you talked about, you talked really honestly about the fact that this book was a challenge, and you talk about the support you need from your family. I was really surprised to read that you said that you go through periods of doubt and uncertainty. It surprised me, and it made me feel better about my own struggles. Can you talk a little bit about that in the context of this book before we get into the meat of this book?
Yeah, Jeff, it's a great question. And if you're trying to make me cry off the top, I am a crier. So you've been very successful. Now you're going right there, right for the heartstrings on the first question. Yeah, it was a challenge for a number of reasons. So this book was supposed to be something else, and I guess when you have aspirations for something, you want it to be something, and it fails, and it doesn't go where you want it to go, you feel a little disappointed. But I'm glad, in retrospect, I understand why the book didn't become what it was supposed to become. Now, this had nothing to do with the big three from the start. This was supposed to be a book about a team, a championship team, trying to grasp one more shot at it, trying to get there. The Celtics had come off a really heartbreaking series against Miami in 2012. They were up 3-2 in that series. LeBron, think about this. LeBron hadn't won a championship yet, Jeff. Yeah. So they were up 3-2. They came back to Boston. Everybody was writing off the Miami Heat. Ooh, Pat Riley might have to break up this team. It didn't work. And Celtics fans remember LeBron James had one of the all-time great playoff performances, 45 points, 15 rebounds, 5 assists. Then they went to Miami, played a close game 7 for a while. Then Miami pulled away, won game 7. LeBron won his first championship. And then the big three, at that point, it was down to 2 the next season because Ray Allen left.
Yeah.
So that caused a schism there. And the big three kind of dissolved. That was their final year, 2012, 2013. That was it. So it's really supposed to be a story about trying to get a championship, but it just didn't feel right at that time.
Yeah.
And I had taken some notes on it. I said, I'll come back to it. And I really started to have some doubts and fears writing about basketball, quite honestly, because I feel like the best basketball book ever written is David Halberstam's Breaks of the Game.
Yeah. And
so every time I would read that book, I'd say, I'm not going in there. I'm not going in that arena. I'm not going in there. And then there are a lot of people here in Boston who have written fabulous basketball books. You know, Bob Ryan and Terry Pluto wrote 48 Minutes. Pluto, one of his books is up here. He was one of my mentors in Akron. Jackie McMullen wrote a great book on the Celtics and Lakers rivalry when the game was ours. Just so many. So I really stepped away from basketball for a while. I had all these notes. Then I wrote Belichick and Brady.
Yep.
I said, okay, there's an excuse. I can't get to the basketball book. Then I wrote the book with Poppy. I got more excuses to kind of wall myself off from a basketball book. And finally, the vision was clear that this was, with some distance, after the big three, after they'd all retired, and after the trade, we knew what the trade was. And so that's a really interesting book. If I just track pretty much 2003 to 2014, that space, because not only is the story about the big three, but it's a story about the rebirth of the Celtics and how the NBA changed too. All those things started to come together. And I stopped being scared. I said, I just got to do it. Just got to write this book because I feel like it's in me and I got to get it out.
Yeah, and I was really struck by that. And I'm not trying to go for the Barbara Walters moment here, but you talked about the fact that your family, you
will get it today. I promise you.
Well, you said your family was praying for you to finish the book, and that you got this big hug at the end. And I actually read that to my wife last night, and I got a little bit choked up. So thank you for seeing it through. It's a great book. It gives us all a chance to bathe in those waters again of that championship team. And what I really like about the book is that it does have a long tail. is that, a book like this, the way that it's supposed to go, it's supposed to end with the, the final moments of the championship game, and then not really mention what happens afterwards. But the big moment, comes right in the middle. And then we do see how the NBA changes. And of course, LeBron James casts a long shadow over the whole thing, because you can't tell the story without him as a centerpiece. So so let's get into it a little bit. I have a lot of questions for you, and I know that there are going to be some fans who have some questions too. But thank you for making me feel seen as an author. It was really cool to do that. And just a little bit of a refresher on my own experience as a fan. I'm a carpetbagger. I didn't come from around here. I came to Boston in 2005, 2 years before you. And it was funny. It was like there was still the hazy afterglow of the 1980s Celtics teams, and nobody was paying attention to the team. And that gave me something to glom onto. I said, well, if nobody cares about this, maybe this could be the thing that I care about. And I really steeped myself in basketball, all things Boston sports. But it was the thing that gave me an entry point into becoming a part of this community. I was wondering what it was like for you as a writer to come into this town and to start telling people the stories of their teams. What was it like as a fellow carpetbagger?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jeff. And I think about that. And I don't know if I could have done it now in this media environment, because everything is so public. And what I mean by that is, if you don't have a radio show, or you don't have a TV show, I'm sure you have social media. And if you're interested in being a sports person, a sports personality, everybody can see you. You can just get on Instagram, get on Twitter, and just kind of tell your story. But when I got to the Globe actually started in 1994. I got there in September of 1994. First day I walked into the Globe, the first person I saw was Bob Ryan, just hanging out, just talking. So Bob Ryan is in front of me. Will McDonough is behind him. Peter Gammons is there getting like a ton of snail mail from the mail area, because he was doing Sunday baseball notes. And my seat was right next to Jackie McMullen's. Yeah. So you get the point. I mean, I was very satisfied to learn from those people. And I sat on the bench for a couple of years, just learning and watching them. And that was at work. And away from work, what did I do? I drove around the city. I rode the T. I rode buses. I just wanted to be around. I wanted to learn the city. Mm-hmm. And, my big sister, Michelle, she came here in 1982. She went to Boston University and never left. Never left Boston. Like, she came from Akron, Ohio to Boston and never left. Yeah. So I had people in the city that I knew people in the city. That helped. That helped tremendously, because I didn't have to just immediately just jump in there and say, hey, here I am, Michael Holley from Akron, Ohio, and I'm going to tell you what it is. Yeah. If I had done that, I would have failed miserably because I didn't know what it was, and I still hadn't discovered my own voice. I was still learning the process. And so I'm thankful that I had a couple of years to figure it out. I mean, I would do all kinds of things: high school sports, college sports, Patriot sidebars, Bruins sidebars, Red Sox, all features all over the city and all over New England. I traveled a lot on the Globe's dime. So it really was a great apprenticeship program for a couple of years. And then when Jackie McMullen left the Globe to go to Sports Illustrated, Peter May started covering the Celtics, covering the NBA, because he was covering the Celtics. He started covering the NBA at large. Celtics needed a beat writer for half of the season. I started covering the Celtics half the season, 95, 96, and then full-time 1996, 97, which was the worst season in Celtics history, 15 wins. But all of that, I'm thankful for it all, because I think all of that informed just my understanding of where I was, not only in that organization, but in this market.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think the first time I fell in love with Boston was a year after I got there. At first, I was really intimidated by the city. I felt, there was like ugliness in the driving and all of that. And then when I went to the Boston Marathon, I think I told you before, and I just, I got there about 3 hours after it was pretty much over, and there were still people cheering on the people who, who are obviously not official racers. And that told me a lot about the city. And of course that, the marathon is it's so special for so many different reasons. So I want to know from the outside, because you came from the outside and you were at first looking into Boston. And I was wondering if then Boston fans felt different to you. And has that changed over time? Do you see Boston fans differently? Now that you've been on the inside, are they special, or do we all just feel like our own fandom is special?
No, it's special. It's special. Look, we know there's sports fans everywhere. And so if you're a fan of college football and you live in Tuscaloosa, you think Alabama fans are the greatest going. And you're right. Okay, they're great. Alabama fans, SEC fans are great. And if you're into baseball and LA Dodgers win the World Series with Mookie Betts, unfortunately, but you win the World Series, you think, yeah, we know our baseball pretty well here. Here's the difference in Boston. There are a couple of things that are different about Boston, which I love. And I can tell you how one of them really spoke to me, and I knew I was in the right place. Boston, trust me on this, Boston is the only major market where the number 3 team here, whatever you think that is, I'm not here to get into a debate on what the number 3 team is. Some people say the number 3 team is the Celtics. Some say it's the Bruins. Some may even say it's the Red Sox. Don't care. That's not the point. The point is, whatever your number 3 or number 4 team is in Boston, the commitment from Boston fans and New England fans to that team is equal to some other city's number 1.
Yeah.
And nobody else is like that. Bruins fans are intense. Bruins fans are great. We know Patriots fans. We know what they are. Red Sox fans. We know that. Celtics, all into it. So all of these teams, even if you say for us, well, nobody's really talking about the Celtics, but it's like nobody's talking about them. Well, why don't you go to another city and see how they talk about their number 1 team? And it's very equivalent to the 2nd or 3rd or 4th team in Boston. Yeah. And this is what spoke to me as someone who has been obsessed with sports and sports writing and writing in general since I was about 9 or 10 years old. My mother, God bless her, raised 3 of us by herself, and I'm the youngest. And so 2 things with my mom. One, when I would try to be in conversation with her, and she was reading a book, she was always reading. And I try to, I'd ask her like silly questions. Mom, what's for dinner? Hey, Mom, did you see this? And she'd always say, Michael, I'm reading. Michael, I'm reading. And so the hint to me was, this is how I can be in conversation with my mother, pick up a book. So she got me into reading at a young age. And the other thing is, she used to say to me, I was into reading, I read all kinds of stuff, but I love sports. And I would always talk to her about sports. And she really had an intervention with me, and she said, Michael, I'm really worried. That's really, you talk about sports all the time, and you can't spend your life focused on sports.
That's hilarious.
But Boston, you can in Boston. You can in Boston. That's what it is. Boston is a true sports city, and aren't you exposed, whether you're a sports journalist or not? And if you're a politician in Boston and you don't know sports language, you don't know sports stories, you get exposed real quick. So I love that about this space. That's different. Those are 2 big differences between Boston and other places.
I saw that Danny Ainge was trending today, and something that struck me about your book is that, Danny Ainge, he's the general manager. He's a main character. He's the main character, I think, in this book. And it struck me that I was wondering if that had been a change over time in a way. Is that I remember Moneyball, where the general manager becomes sort of the protagonist of the story. First of all, is that is that true that that's become more of a feature of sports writing, that the hero of the story becomes the general manager? And then a question for you about Danny Ainge specifically, because he was like an old school general manager. Now he's moved into this new school, and it seems pretty seamless to me. And I was wondering about your assessment of Ainge as a general manager.
Yeah. So as the general manager, as the star, I think that's an astute point. And I think part of it is, there's a team builder hiding in all of us. I think the popularity of fantasy sports and, all these things, there's just something in us that makes us think, hey, I could do this a little bit, or just the fun of conducting a draft and making trades, whether it's with your friends or with people virtually across the country or across the world, but just trying to put yourself in a position as a team builder and see if you can track along with them and make moves that are equal or greater than theirs. Because we all think, especially with our favorite teams, hey, why didn't he do that? Why didn't he draft that guy? Why didn't he sign that guy? Gordon Hayward, why didn't you trade him earlier or something like that? That's all you got was a trade exception. So I think there's a lot of interest in what they do. And the other point about Ainge, I don't really think he's an old school GM. I think he is a player who came into a job and wasn't necessarily married to his era.
Right.
So there are a lot of GMs like that. Hey, when I played in 1985, when I played in 1990, this is what it is. What's going on with these young guys? They don't understand. They don't understand what real toughness is. They don't understand what ball movement is. He's not that guy.
Yeah.
He's a smart guy who will not advertise how smart he is. And that was clear to me from all the people I was able to be just around, people who talked about him when he wasn't around.
Yeah, that's right.
These are MIT people, these are Harvard people, and they'd all say, no, Danny's smarter than us.
Huh, that's interesting.
A couple of things. One, he's a good listener.
Yeah.
And two, he has this exercise, and some people might call it trolling, but he's got a method to the madness. He's got this exercise where you don't know really what he wants to hear. So he'll tell you some things that he doesn't believe to see what your reaction is. And what he's trying to get out of that is, don't tell me that just because I've got the title of general manager, just because I played in the NBA. Don't assume that I know more than you do. Push back.
Yeah.
So when he first took over, one of the co-owners, Steve Paliuca, would come in, and he knew this about Danny, so he did it just to mess with him. He came in, he said, Danny, Jameer Nelson is a great player.
Yeah.
Danny said, Jameer Nelson, he's too small. He'll never make it in the NBA. He's not strong enough. Then Steve Paliuca came in a couple of days later and said, I'm not really a fan of it. I've been watching Jameer Nelson, not a fan. Hey, Jameer Nelson really can make some shots. He's a good ball handler. So he's really he wants to see, and he told me this. He said, make an argument. I want to see how you think. How did you come to this conclusion? Don't just hot take me here.
Yeah.
Give me some glimpse into how you come up with information.
Yeah.
Come to an analogy.
Yeah, what really strikes me about, when I say old school, I didn't mean he has an old school mentality or he's a sort of ancient thinking. It's more that the game itself has the way that the power has moved from the teams to the owners to the players in some ways, and he's had to navigate all of that. That's a lot to navigate. So I think he's been successful in all phases. So I'm impressed by him myself. I actually want to talk about Paul Pierce, the founding member of the new Big Three, if you will. He's drafted, I think, at number 8. I have to be honest. I saw him all the way through. Oh, was it 10? Oh gosh.
10, yeah.
Saw him all the way. How did he drop to number 10? All the way through, and I never really understood his game. I looked at him. I say he's not playing above the rim. He doesn't look really athletic. He looks kind of slow to me. His feet are planted on the ground. How is this guy so effective? I need you to explain to me his game and why it worked.
Yeah, it's a good point, Jeff. Doc Rivers said when he was in Orlando, when Doc was in Orlando, one time, Paul lit them up in the first half, and he went into the locker room, and Doc just laid into his team. He said, "How are we letting this guy? He's fat, he's unathletic. Like, why? How are we letting him score? He's not that good. What are we doing?" And he said, the more, and this is before he even got to Boston, he said the more he looked at Pierce, he understood. There are a couple of things about Pierce that you appreciate when you see him up close. One, he is, and Kansas basketball fans will love hearing this. He is as fundamentally sound as any player in the NBA in the last 15, 20 years.
Wow.
His footwork is outstanding. Goes left, goes right. Really understands what defenses are trying to do to him. He knows how to slip off of screens. He knows how to get into the lane, initiate contact, and get off. But here's the thing that's going to blow your mind, because you just see him. You see these NBA players now, the bulk, and they're ripped and they're cut, and they're obviously strong.
Yeah.
But Paul Pierce, I grew up in Ohio. I can say that he's kind of like country strong. Okay. You look at this guy and you say, well, oh, it's just, there's nothing there, but it's really tough to move. And so when he got into his second or third year, if you look back at those pictures, no, that's not a fat guy. No. That's just a really solid. I think that's the best way of putting it. He's like a solid a tank.
Yeah.
And so you combine the footwork, the understanding of basketball, and the strength, and that's how for many years, Jeff, he was one of the leaders in the NBA in free throw attempts. And this is back when Shaq was there, Tim Duncan, Kobe, Tracy McGrady. He had more free throw attempts than all of them for a couple of years because he was able to get to the lane. And one more story on that. Doc used to draw plays, and he'd go to Paul and he'd say, "Hey, Paul, what do you think about this play?" And Paul would say, "Okay, just tell me where you want me to be, and I can get there on the floor." So, okay, the play is great. Tell me where do you want me to be? Yeah. And I'll get there. And he just had a knack for getting there based on his understanding and deceptive speed. Because of that footwork and because of his knowledge, that makes you a little bit faster than you really are. And the inverse is there are a lot of people who just don't understand. They're great athletes who don't understand how to play basketball. And so you look at their bodies and you look at their gifts and you say, why aren't you better? You're not better because you don't really understand the nuances of the game. Yeah.
Something I remember was that Paul Pierce had almost slipped notice in a way, is that after he won the championship season, he went through LeBron James, he went through Kobe Bryant. LeBron James wasn't exactly at his prime yet, but right after that, he said to, I think it was like a Spanish newspaper, he said, "I'm the best player in the world." And I remember he really took a lot of heat for that. It caught the attention of the mainstream media, I guess you could say. And I was wondering if it was correct, at least in that sliver of time. Why wouldn't he feel that way?
Yeah, right there, in that sliver of time, absolutely. During that run, that run. Look, it's stunning. If you look at baseball, for example, look at baseball. You look at World Series MVPs. You'll see some great players who are World Series MVPs, and you'll see some guys. You say, okay, I guess he had a great postseason, but he really wasn't a great player. If you look at NBA Finals MVPs, it is really difficult to find a bum. You're not going to find a bum on the list. Now, there will be tiers because obviously Bill Russell is there, Michael Jordan is there, Larry Bird, those great players. But the bottom of that is probably Chauncey Billups. In 2004, Chauncey Billups is a really good player.
Yeah.
So when you are finals, I think a finals MVP, there are no flukes. Finals MVPs are great players.
Yeah.
And I would say that's the only sport that you can say that about. I mean, Nick Foles was a Super Bowl MVP, backup quarterback. He's terrible. But that doesn't happen in basketball. When you and I think that's what the players really value. When you go up against the best of the best and you come out on top, then for that moment you are the best.
Yeah, I'll buy that. That sounds good to me. I remember hearing the trade news about, Allen and then Garnett. I think it went in that order. At the time, I felt like it felt interesting to me because, when you looked at their ages, they were, I think that the early stages of 30, but definitely a little past their primes, I guess you could say. And I was really surprised that everybody had them pegged as champions. It felt more like an experiment to me. Like some of these teams that cobbled together a few, like you probably remember Karl Malone and some others joined up at the same time on the Lakers. It felt like that to me.
Way past his prime, man. Malone and Gary Payton.
Yes, right.
In LA with Shaq and Kobe.
Yeah, but did it not feel that way to you?
It didn't. I'll tell you why. This was a big three where everything already made sense. All right, so in other words, you've got Kevin Garnett, who's a multi-position, who's a big four, who could play five, didn't really want to, but he could guard at times, depending on the three, he could guard three positions. He could guard a four, he could guard a five, sometimes he guarded three, especially when he was younger, he guarded everybody on the floor. But you got a 7-footer who's not really going to get in the way of Paul Pierce. And Pierce is that scorer. If you need a guy to just carry you for a while, get to the line, take some hits, do all kinds of things, Pierce is that guy. And Ray Allen is a pure shooter. So if you look at it, they all kind of fit. And all you plug in a Kendrick Perkins, who's this bruiser, who's not going to demand the ball that much. And then you have like a personal valet at point guard,
right.
John Rondo,
who
just wants to set people up, and at times to his detriment. At times he would drive to the basket, and you say, "Put the layup up," and he'd turn around and he'd kick it out to the 3-point line for Ray Allen or Paul Pierce. But I think the parts fit together, and they were hungry, Jeff. I mean, they all took it very personally that they were great players, and they all were great all NBA, all-star players who were in the lottery. It was embarrassing to them. They had never played in the NBA Finals, and you start looking at the clock. You say, "I'm 30, I'm 31, I'm 32.
Yeah,
this thing is fragile. Is it ever going to happen for me? Will I be looked at," as Doc pointed out to them on that duck boat ride he took before the season? Do you really want to be on this list of great players who haven't won a championship? And there's just something about them. They were great, but do you want to be one of those "you're great, but" guys? And by the way, parenthetically, let me tell you, I tried so hard to get that list out of Doc. Like, well, who's on the list?
I noticed.
Told them. He said, "I got a list." I'm like, okay, well, who's on it? Who's on it? He wouldn't give it up.
Well, Charles Barkley's got to be on that list. Something that I really liked, like I said, the book is Danny Ainge is one of the main characters. And I think in a really subtle and sly way, Kevin Garnett is the other main character. My read from your reporting is that even though Kevin Garnett was not there that long, a few years, handful of years, that he's as true a Celtic as you can find. I was wondering how you feel about him and how you feel about the Celtics talking about retiring his number.
Yeah. It's almost as if he should have played his whole career in Boston because of his mentality.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's a coincidence that he had a lot of Celtics tendencies coming in here. And part of that, you start your career in Minnesota with Kevin McHale. And he used to be in McHale's office constantly, or on the court with McHale. McHale coached the team in some interim stages between coaches. So on the court, in practice, going over moves with McHale and talking about like the mentality. What's the NBA mindset with Kevin McHale? And so when he got here, he was that superstar. He was a Celtic. He was a true Celtic before he even played for the Celtics. The way he looked at the game. I brought up that duck boat ride with Doc Rivers, on that ride, and I think it was very telling that Garnett said this to him. Doc said, "Hey guys, I'm going to need you to sacrifice. Win a championship. You're really going to have to sacrifice. Are you willing to sacrifice?" Kevin said, "Yes." He said, "I'm going to need some of your shots." And Kevin said, "Coach, how many do you need?" And Doc jokingly said, "All of them."
Yeah.
And Kevin said, "You got it."
Yeah.
He was dead serious.
Yeah.
This is so rare. It's rare. And he was like this in Minnesota too. That's why I enjoyed watching him from afar. He was the rare superstar who he got his satisfaction from other people thriving. And he could score. I mean, Kevin Garnett's career scoring average, I'm guessing off the top of my head, 17, 18 points a game. It easily could have been 22, 23.
Yeah.
He didn't, that's not what he wanted to do. He wanted to rebound. He wanted to pass. He wanted to defend. And he wanted his team to win. And so by the time he got to the Celtics, and as I mentioned, no wins and no NBA Finals appearances, he was ready to do whatever Doc wanted him to. And Doc says in the epilogue, one of my favorite quotes, he said, "If you didn't know, if you were just dropped in from another planet and you didn't know anything about our team, you would have thought that Kevin Garnett was one of our role players."
Yeah.
He was a guy who said to the coach, "Take my talent, use me as you see fit."
Yeah.
And yeah, that's really what I love about the Celtics in general. I hope that this continues, and Jason Tatum is going to challenge this. But I love that the Celtics have never had a scorer on the team who has led the NBA in scoring. I love that.
Yeah, I like
Larry
that.
Bird never did it. Sam Jones never did it. John Havlicek never did it. I love that. Keep it going, because that really tells you what the franchise is all about. It's not about numbers in Boston. It's just about winning.
Yeah, yeah. And here's a parenthetical for you. Did you see Uncut Gems?
Oh yeah. Oh man.
I was wondering how it made me uncomfortable. I mean, the movie's designed to make you uncomfortable, right? But the Garnett stuff, like, he was good in that role, but it made me wonder, like, how close is this to what could have happened? Like, I was like, could this have happened? You know, it felt a little too real to me. How close is Garnett to that character?
Very. Garnett is he's outrageous in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
The story, and I'll tell you a little inside bookmaking story. So there's one, and I thought it was the perfect reaction from a copy editor. So one of the early drafts of the book, I tell the story about Garnett. He was into order. He was into the right way to do things. Okay, so look, you got it. Hey, we're the players. And if there's food here for the players, nobody else gets food until the players get food.
Yeah.
So one day he goes into the locker room and he sees a team doctor just kind of like heaping the post game spread onto his plate, and he knocks it up. Like food flies everywhere, forks fly everywhere. And so I put that in there so you can understand just the mentality of Kevin Garnett. Now, my editor says, "Oh, that's a great story." The copy editor says, "What's wrong with this?"
Jive with the rest of them, right?
He's like, "Oh, this is awful." And that's but really that's Kevin Garnett in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Some people just didn't get him. Even people in the organization, they didn't really understand what he was all about. Ultimately, it came down to winning.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, there were a lot of things swirling around Garnett, but just his language. I mean, if you were sensitive and there were certain words you didn't want to hear, don't hang around Kevin Garnett, because he's going to say those words. And he was loud. He was always challenging his teammates to be better. I mean, not in a disrespectful way, but he just brought a jolt of energy to the franchise. And to this day, as I look over Celtics history, there really hasn't been anyone like him in the history of the franchise. On the court, Defensively, he could say, I stand on the shoulders of the greatest defensive player in NBA history, and Bill Russell. And Bill Russell was very thoughtful and cerebral, an activist off the court, one of the first athletes to stand up and talk about things outside of the sports realm. But Bill Russell, personality-wise, is not like Kevin Garnett. Kevin Garnett, there really hasn't been anyone like him in Celtics history.
Yeah, another really interesting character in this cast of characters is Rajon Rondo, who I think I'm like almost every Celtics fan, equal parts vexed by and thrilled by Rondo. You talk about earlier in the book, in the early stages of the book, you talk about Red Auerbach saying that one of the teams was too soft, or that they didn't have an instigator. And then it strikes me that, that Auerbach dies right when Rondo comes onto the scene. Do you feel comfortable enough to say that Auerbach would have loved Rondo as a player?
I think he would have loved Rondo's passion. I think he would have had some. He would have sat him down a couple of times though.
Yeah.
But the thing with Rondo, and this is it's so interesting. Danny was smitten with Rondo before he became a Celtic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of the Celtic scouts, Will McDonough's son, actually, Ryan McDonough, and went on to become a general manager in Phoenix. But Ryan McDonough, when he first started with the Celtics, went to Argentina to scout USA basketball 20 and under team. And he saw, and there are some good players there, but he saw this rangy, gangly, 6'6", at that time about 165, 166 pounds. It looked like his whole jersey was swallowing him up. He wore this headband, and you could see a head in there somewhere. But he came back and he told Danny, he said, this is really intriguing. I really haven't seen anybody quite like this. And Danny had seen him in high school a bit, went back and revisited. He loved Rondo on tape. They used to do a lot of analytical models.
Yeah.
And Rondo blew up their analytical models. They said he's a game changer, even though it looks like he can't shoot, but we need him.
Yeah.
And so when Wick Grossbeck went to Danny and said, hey, I want you to go back into the draft and get Rondo. I'll give you this one. You really seem to be obsessed with him. So you can have him. And he went back in the draft and got him. So Danny loved him. Doc, a hot and cold relationship. They had their battles. There was a celebrated one, but many other small fires.
Yeah.
Ray Allen didn't like him.
Yeah.
KG loved him.
Yeah.
Paul Pierce was more on Rondo's side. So he was a guy who there are a lot of opinions on Rondo, but when he was at his best, and this is the important thing to remember, especially for people who are putting together teams or coaches out there who are trying to make everybody the same.
Yeah.
You can win with guys like that. You
Yeah.
can't win with four guys like that, but you
Yeah.
can win with one of them. When he was very competitive, much more so than it was reported. And when the game was on the line, with Rondo was doing his thing, you look at it, KG had the best field goal percentage of his career. Paul Pierce had the best field goal percentage of his career. And Ray Allen, despite the fact that he couldn't stand him, had the best field goal percentage of his career because Rondo knew the offense and knew how to set those guys up.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned before Jackie McMullen's book, When the Game Was Ours, which I found out that she didn't come up with that title, which I thought was interesting. It's about, when Bird and Magic own the league.
Writers never do.
Right.
Writers never come up with the title.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
No, you do. Listen,
I get you.
Like you're in a different category. Of course you do, but we don't.
Oh man. So this it's the story of when Bird and Magic, they were the league's premier stars, and the subtext of the title is When the Game Was Ours until Michael Jordan came along. And I think that there's a subtext in your story as well, is that Pierce, Garnett, and Allen were operating in a similar state. They saw LeBron coming. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, about what that might have been like for them to see this kind of superior force coming through? And did it make their window seem smaller?
You know, that's a great question, Jeff. And it seems crazy to say this now, but they weren't worried about him.
Yeah, right.
I mean, if you think about it from their perspective, they weren't worried about him. So first, there was this rivalry before there was even a big three. There's this rivalry between Paul Pierce and LeBron James.
Yeah.
And in the book, you have Pierce seeing him play at UMass Boston because the first draft pick, the highest draft pick Danny Ainge had, his first class was Marcus Banks, point guard.
Yeah.
Celtics desperately needed a point guard. So Pierce goes to UMass Boston to see the Celtics rookies and free agents take on the Cavaliers rookies and free agents, and he sees LeBron James there. He didn't go to see James. He went to see Banks, but James was unmistakable. And he kept in the back of his mind. He said, okay, talented rookie, I'll check him. And so they did not like each other almost immediately. I mean, Pierce spat at him in a exhibition game in Columbus, spat at the bench. You know, they always, this was not one of those cliche, oh, they're on different teams, but they have great respect for each other. No, not quite, not quite. So there was always this Pierce LeBron thing, and as LeBron started to get more attention, and his teams got better, Celtics teams got worse. And so Pierce is saying, I know I'm not LeBron James, but I'm a really good player. And his last year before the big three, he did everything. Pierce did. Had a great season. And he was shut out from all NBA teams. We call it in 2020, he was Bradley Beal'd. He got the Bradley Beal treatment. And so when they got their group together and they won in 2008, and they beat LeBron in Game 7, okay, feel good about it. We got past LeBron, we're champions. 2009, they were one of the best basketball teams I've seen in the last 25 years. KG gets hurt, changes their whole season. 2010, they're counted out, but they beat LeBron again. LeBron, number one team in the East, they wipe them out. So you think about it. They've had two high-profile matchups with the Cavaliers. They knock them off twice. They feel like they can understand LeBron. He's a great player, but we got him. And when LeBron, when he first got with Bosh and Wade, those first two games, Celtics won those games too. And if before the Perkins trade changed it, because when Perkins came back from his injury that he suffered in Game 6 of the 2010 Finals, he came back from his injury. One of his first games was against Miami at the Garden. Guess what? Celtics win it again. They felt like we don't fear him. And that's why I'm telling you today, to this day, Paul Pierce cannot be objective about LeBron James. You see it. He hates on him all the time. Always hating on LeBron. Oh, he's not the greatest player. He's not in my top 5.
Right.
It has carried over. Now the irony, Jeff, is that Rajon Rondo just won a championship with LeBron, and they got mad. The Celtics players got mad when Ray Allen left to play with LeBron. I would never go to that team. I'd never play with them. As wise people always say, hey, live long enough and you'll run into a contradiction. Live long enough and you'll do some things that you said you'd never do. That's just life. People are much more complex than we think.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because within the confines of this story happens the decision, which you call an inflection point. And it's really when players started to take agency, or at least superstar players started to take, exercise a little bit of control and act like general managers themselves. And I was thinking about that, about how I felt about the decision and then that first Heat team then, and how I feel about it now. And it really has changed. I remember I felt angry. I felt like everybody did, everybody who wasn't a Heat fan. Angry with LeBron. How could he do that to Cleveland? Hating that team. They seem so arrogant, et cetera, et cetera. And now I look back on it. I look at it differently. And I was wondering if you had, have your feelings been consistent about that situation, or have your feelings evolved as well?
No, I think my feelings on it have evolved. One, shame on me. I was a bad journalist. my mother still lives in Ohio, and a lot of my family all over the state. I've got family in Cleveland, Akron, Columbus, Cincinnati, just all over the state. And my mom is like the mayor of Akron.
Yeah.
So before the decision, like I was on vacation. I remember it vividly. I was on vacation, and my mom, she's one of those people who does leave voicemails, and she leaves long voicemails. So she left a long voicemail, 2 or 3 minutes, and she was wearing her hair in a natural, like shortcut. So she'd go to the barbershop, and like the end of the message in 2010 was, "Oh, by the way, I was in the barbershop, and LeBron's going to Miami. Love you." This is 2 days. It's 2 days before the decision.
That's hilarious.
Because LeBron, she knows everybody, and like everybody in Akron, like they know each other. They, so she had the scoop, and I was not wise enough to take advantage of that scoop and say, "Hey, I know LeBron. I know where LeBron's going." So at the time, I said he shouldn't have done it that way, and I still stand by that. He shouldn't have done it that way.
Yeah.
But leaving Cleveland for Miami, it's fine.
Yeah.
We have this thing in sports where we look at a guy who's drafted, and a draft is supposed to determine your loyalty.
Yeah.
And I know it's sports, and I know that's what we want, but that's not the reality. That's the only, in sports is the only field where we look at it that way, where if somebody wants to go somewhere else, not because they want to win or just because, hey, I want to change the scenery. I don't like the city. I don't like I want to do something else. We kind of frown upon it. Now, LeBron left because he did want to win a championship, and he wanted to put together a team.
Yeah.
The disconnect, and I think the point that people will argue over is how that team came together.
Yeah.
If you tell me that you're against super teams, I'll say you're against the NBA.
Yeah.
Because Red Auerbach put together super teams. Jerry West put together super teams. Jerry Krause put together super teams. So that's been done at the general manager level. Danny Ainge put together a super team. The issue for a lot of people is they don't want players to do it. If the general manager does it, I'm good with it. If a player decides it, I don't like it. And I'm saying I don't mind it. I don't mind that a player says, "Hey, I want to go play with him." Because, this is what I've learned in my old age. I've learned it. Yeah, go ahead and do it. Everybody's not like LeBron.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not always going to work. It worked when Kevin Durant went to Golden State, of course. All-time great team, 73-win team adds Kevin Durant. You almost have to be like, you have to have your eyes closed for not to work. But think about LeBron James. LeBron James had one kind of team in Miami. They went to. He had another kind of team in Cleveland, different style. They win one. And now he just went to the Lakers with Anthony Davis, different kind of team. He's this point guard with 10 assists a game and averaging 25 points. A lot of guys can't do that. So Celtics fans, when you hear that James Harden wants to go play with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, I say, good, because that ain't going to work. That won't work.
I agree. I told my kids.
Every player doesn't have general manager sensibilities, even if they have general manager urgings.
That's hilarious. Yeah, you talk about this idea of player agency, and you say it towards the end of your book, Ray Allen, all he wanted was to be able to call Boston home and know it wasn't going to change. It's like, it really made me reflect on these players that don't have agency. They don't get to choose. They're millionaires, multimillionaires, and they don't get to just choose where they're going to live and who their friends are going to be. I mean, that's got to take a toll on these players, So I'm glad you pointed it out. Hey, Michael, I've hogged you for so long, and I had meant to start taking questions about 20 minutes ago. So I apologize to everybody who's tuned in. Kim, we're going to let's get 3 of the best questions we have, and then I have one or 2 more of my own.
Okay, so this is a question from Mike. He said, how did the construction of the Big Three in Boston influence the building of teams league-wide? For instance, the Big Three in Miami, or to a degree, what we saw in Golden State?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it was like the precursor to the NBA changing. It influenced LeBron, no question. And that's why, to answer Jeff's question, and that's a great question, by the way, to answer Jeff's question about how the Celtics felt about LeBron, they kind of took some pride in the knowledge that they forced him to make that decision. If he had won in Cleveland, would he have left? I'm not sure. But they beat him in 08. They forced him out. That was their take. We forced you out in 2010. We made you go and get help. And I think once LeBron went to Miami, that was part of the change. But I really think it opened up tremendously when LeBron went to Cleveland and then started doing these 1+1 deals and say, hey, I'm not going to sign up for a long time. I'm going to keep my options open. I'm going to have this partnership with the general manager. And it used to be, and it really turned it around, honestly, because it used to be coaches and general managers used to tell players things that they wanted to make the players feel that they had a voice. But ultimately, it was what the coach and the GM wanted. Now it's the inverse. Now players tell the general managers and coaches what they want. General managers and coaches go in front of the media and they give the announcement, but it all has happened behind the scenes from the players. I think that really started to change, not necessarily with Miami, but I say when LeBron went to Cleveland, that really was a big switch right around 2015. All
right. Kim, who's next?
Okay, Robert would like to know who gave Paul Pierce the nickname The Truth and why?
Well, I was looking over at the book. I could read it, but there are probably some kids in the audience. The truth, that nickname is actually an edit. You know, back in the day before we had XM radio, Sirius XM radio, you just had pop radio. There's such a thing called a radio edit when it had curses in it. They just kind of play the radio version, the clean version. So Shaquille O'Neal gave him that nickname in 2001. The Celtics went out to Los Angeles. They lost the game, but Pierce had 42 points. After the game, Shaquille O'Neal is shaking his head and saying, Paul Pierce is the bleep, bleep truth. And we took out the bleep, bleep, and so the truth. I think it's a good nickname.
All right, Kim, give us another question.
All right, last question from Matthew. He's watching on Facebook. He has a question from your WEEI radio days. What made you decide to leave and go do what you're doing on NBC Sports Boston?
Yeah, it's a good question. What's his name, Matt?
Yes.
All right, Matt, it's a good question. What made me decide to leave? Multiple things. So I'll tell you, when I got there, I got to WEEI in 2005, March 2005, actually. And I did not think I would stay for more than 5 years. And so 5 years turned into 10 years. 10 years turned into 13 years. And I just, I didn't see myself staying there for the bulk of my career. And I felt like there were other things that I needed to do, that I wanted to do. And so, like in most cases, you know, you have to forgive me. I just got to tell you context. My great grandfather is a pastor. My grandfather was a reverend. My mother is practically a reverend. So I'm always going. You know, I'll go back to the Bible and I'll go back to prayer. But I really spent a lot of prayer on what to do next, because I could feel that it was time to do something. I wasn't sure what it was. And when I stopped doing TV in 2005, it was not my choice. But my show got fired, and my show should have been fired. Kim mentioned it off the top. IMAX was not the show. It was not the show that I envisioned. And I knew that probably 2 or 3 weeks into it. So in the back of my mind, I said, you know, I want to do TV again, full time. And before I left WEEI, Matt, I'd start doing TV. I was doing TV and radio. And I just didn't see that lasting for a long time. I had to make a decision on what I was going to do. I'm glad I made that decision. I think the decision was made for me, quite honestly, through prayer. And so doing TV opened me up to do some teaching at BU. I'm on sabbatical right now because you can only do so much, right? So do some teaching at BU has opened up this opportunity at Peacock, has given me time to think of other book ideas. So I'm glad I did it. I loved working there for 13 years. It was a job that taught me a lot about myself, taught me a lot about other people, allowed me to be in conversation publicly with Boston sports fans every day. But I thought 13 years was a good run, and it was time to do something else.
Yeah. And Kim, Michael, I'm gonna ask you a few hot takes before we get off the line. But
Let's go, man. I'm enjoying it. Hey, listen, I'm enjoying it.
I did want to talk about your book. I mean, this for everybody that's on the line right now. It's a great book. I read it myself with no help from an adult, and it's a great book for you, for your father, your father-in-law for this Christmas. It's a great time to get it. Michael's going to sell a bunch. He's going to sign a bunch of the books, so you'll have a special edition from An Unlikely Story. So I loved it. I love it, especially I think because there is a little bit of distance, and so you do have a little bit more perspective looking back. It wasn't just a book that was written to capitalize on the championship. There's depth to it that's really appreciated. All right, a few hot takes for you.
Okay.
Michael, let's say you were building a Celtics team right now, and you know everything you know about Paul Pierce. Who do you draft, 19-year-old Jason Tatum or 19-year-old Paul Pierce?
Oh, that's an awesome question.
Thank you.
Oh, goodness gracious. What are you doing to me?
I wasn't expecting that response. The questions go downhill from here.
Yeah, I'm going to have to say this is a tough one, but I got to go with Pierce. I got to go with Pierce, even though, see, once again, remember, I was about to make that same mistake. We're talking about body type. So I look at Jason Tatum.
Yeah.
He's in great shape. He's getting stronger and stronger. He's got that crossover three, which I never saw Paul Pierce do. Pierce, I mean, Pierce is a great scorer, but some things Jason Tatum can do are pretty special. But Pierce, the proof is, look at all the things Pierce did over his career, and it wasn't always perfect, and he had his mistakes.
Yeah.
But it's hard. It's hard to argue with that production. So I'm gonna go with Pierce on that one.
All right. It didn't escape my notice that you reported the Kevin McHale, Kevin Garnett trade pretty straight without a lot of subjectivity. Was there any element to that trade that was done because these guys were friends? Because a lot of people see that as a really lopsided trade in Ainge's favor.
I can understand why people think that, but if you think about this is when I remember I said to you a while ago. I said, "Hey, Danny," a while ago. That's not a shot. It's not a shot. I'm enjoying our conversation, Jeff. So this is not some passive aggressive commentary on the time. It's not.
Yeah.
But when I said how smart Danny is, so think about this. Danny, he hires Mike Zarin, who is a third-year Harvard Law School student, and Zarin just came in to do some analytics stuff for them. But Zarin continued to rise. Once Daryl Morey left to be general manager in Houston and some other organizational changes, here's Morey, this kid that he hired is now his assistant general manager. So this is so smart. Mike Zarin wrote the language on the trade between the Celtics and the Timberwolves before KG. This is Celtics Timberwolves, Wally Zerbiak coming to Boston, and then Marcus Banks and Mark Blunt and others, Ricky Davis, going to Minnesota. But Minnesota gave them a 2009 first-round pick. Mike Zarin wrote the language so that by 2009, this trade was made in 2006 or 2005, somewhere around there, that by the time we get to 2009, that's going to be an unprotected pick. So now, fast forward. Kevin McHale knows he has to trade KG.
Yeah.
But Danny's got his 2009 first round pick. So just, okay, play this out here.
Yeah.
Let's say you trade KG to Phoenix and you don't have, and you know you're going to be bad. You're going to be in the lottery. But not only do you not have KG, now you don't have your lottery pick.
Yeah.
And that could be the number one pick. That could be the number one pick in the draft. It wound up being like number 5.
Yeah. Yeah. But it could be number 1.
Danny had assets. He knew Kevin McHale loved Al Jefferson, who was a 16 and 11 player at 22 or 23 years old. Was a good player. People forget about that. He had Al Jefferson. Kevin liked Gerald Green and the other young players. But Kevin really, he's like, God, I need that. I need a couple of first round picks, including that 2009 first rounder you stole from me.
Yeah.
Because if I'm going to trade, if Kevin Garnett goes anywhere else, now I'm really screwed. So Danny had the inside track, not only because of his relationship with Kevin McHale, because he had assets that nobody else had. Now, this is what generally happens. I'm glad you called them hot takes. And this is where I am, and back to Matt's question, maybe another reason I'm not on radio anymore, because hot takes sound good. They sound good, but a lot of them are full of crap. You know, hey, it is not sexy. I know you're not entertained if I tell you all the machinations of why that was a fair trade. You would rather hear Danny got it because they're best friends. That sounds better. I admit it. That sounds better, but it's not accurate.
Yeah, yeah. I appreciate the nuance.
So
and you're
sports radio will reward the hot take.
Yeah.
But the nuance take, not so much.
All right, my last question, like I told you, the questions diminish in quality as we go. December 14th is the start of the preseason. We were just in the bubble yesterday. Does that feel too soon to you too?
Yeah, that's too soon.
Yeah.
But you know, the NBA has to do it because just like what's happening in the NFL, the reason the Ravens and Steelers are playing at 3:00 on a Wednesday afternoon is because of TV contracts. NBC, my employer wants that money.
Yeah.
And so I think the wise thing to do, especially since the Ravens, they had a strength coach who didn't follow protocols, and there was this outbreak. The wise thing to do, unfortunately, hey, I'm sorry, Ravens, there are consequences. You got to take a loss.
Yeah.
I would have given the Ravens a forfeit loss, given the Steelers the win, and kept it moving. They were supposed to play on Thanksgiving to Sunday at 1, Sunday at 1 to Monday to Tuesday to Wednesday.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
It's all for the money. So that's why the NBA is starting now, money.
See, I knew you had a hot take in you. Michael, I kept you a lot longer than I intended to, but I appreciate the conversation very, very much. And I'm sure that everybody on this line does too. So thank you very much again, everybody. Please consider getting the Big Three. It's a great book. You'll love everything you forgot about this team. And Michael, you did a great job of bringing it back out into the open, and I appreciate that. All right. Well, we can't wait to see you in person here again, and so I hope you have a good holiday season, and we'll see you down the road.
And, hey, listen, happy holidays to everybody there. Thank you for coming out. It is still coming out. You took the time to spend some time with me. I'm very appreciative. And I got to say, I love being in this market. This is not normal. I always say this. It's not normal to have sports books in this market become bestsellers.
Yeah.
It happens here. It doesn't happen. That's another difference between Boston and other places. It doesn't happen in other places like it happens here.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your passion and your interest. And Jeff, I'll be looking for those books.
All right.
Looking for those books when I come down there. I got three kids now. 3 kids. They all want your book.
That's awesome. Well, we'll line them up for you. Thanks again, Michael. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Kim, for hosting, and Cassie on the back.
Michael.
Take care, guys.
Thank
Bye-bye.
Take care.
See you later.